This video is sponsored by War Thunder. So I did a Kuva tier list somewhat recently, and yeah, let's just say I got some mixed reviews.
W's in the shot. W's in the shot.
So I'm going to start this video prefacing this rule so that most of you don't miss this. All of the ratings for the Tenet weapons are based on a mixture of my live chat's ratings, my personal rating, and most importantly, how they perform by themselves, not determined by unique synergies or certain frames that make that weapon powerful. So, the tiers will be rated on how a weapon performs by just slapping it on any loadout you see fit. I will try my best to mention what tier I think the weapon would be if I know of a synergy for it. Please keep this in mind. I know tier lists get heated, so if you have an opinion, by all means pop them in the comments below, but be nice about it and be respectful. You don't need to be rude or be a dick about it. Alright, the Tenet tier list. This will be structured the exact same as the Kuva tier list, so if you haven't watched that, then go and check it out once you have finished this video. We are going over all of the Tenet weapons, what elements I think would be good with them. Please note that I may get one or two wrong, and understand that just because I suggest an element doesn't mean you have to go with that one. We will also be going over the builds for each of these weapons, steel path and beginner builds, which again will change depending on what element you have gone for. And then of course, finally, the ratings. Let's not waste any time, shall we? We have 15 weapons to talk about. Up first, we have the Tenet Tetra. The Tenet Tetra is an auto assault rifle with a unique trait that allows you to use all of your magazine capacity to shoot out an explosive grenade in a wide radius. So here is the thing with the Tenet Tetra. I do and don't like this weapon. So the main fire actually has multiplicative CO with galvanized aptitude. This is a massive damage increase in steel path. The alternate fire is okay with some buffing from, let's say, a frame or priming, and it does some decent damage to be fair, especially when it comes to group clearing easy enemies. But the alternate fire rips through your ammo sustain. If you are smart with this, you can get away with it, but the reason for this is because if you don't have an ammo mutation mod and make use of the Tetra exclusive mod called Kinetic Ricochet, then you're going to struggle with the ammo if you are hardcore spamming your alt fire. This mod is really nice and makes the Tetra feel a lot better in my honest opinion. Or you can not run it and instead run an ammo mutation mod. It's honestly up to you. But this weapon is a so-so for me. It's a solid choice, I'll give it that. This is the budget star chart setup, and here is the steel path setup for you if you are in the late game of Warframe. Please note these are guidelines, and also know that builds will be dependent on your element you have chosen, and also if you see primed mods, just use the normal one. This applies for the rest of the video. I don't want to repeat myself each time. When it comes to the elements, I would suggest magnetic, heat, or toxin if you're opting for a hunter munitions setup. I do want to mention that Mesa with her first ability making use of the alternate fire is really powerful and a fun synergy with this weapon. Also, priming with this weapon bumps it up to A tier because of the raw damage from the multiplicative CO scaling. As for the rating, I'd give this a solid B tier. Up next, we have the Tenet Envoy. Now this is one of the AoE weapons which was not hurt so bad from the ammo nerfs. The Envoy is weird and unique, but I kind of like it and it just feels cool and satisfying to use. It's not the best single target damage dealer, but it's really nice for group clearing. The Envoy shoots out rockets, but it has a unique trait that allows you to guide your rockets mid-air when you aim and shoot. It also reloads 10% of the magazine per second while holstered. This weapon does need an ammo mutation mod though to make it feel a lot better, and in all honesty, I really like this weapon. It's cool and you could do some funky things with the aim fire, but I don't really like it, to be honest. I just like launching rockets at nearby enemies, so I mainly hip fire with this weapon. What is a cool tactic is aiming at a group of enemies, shooting a few times so that the rockets slow down, and then letting go of your aim and just absolutely obliterate them in a second. The Tenet Envoy doesn't have good status chance, so when it comes to modding it, I would really recommend going for a hunter munitions viral setup. It's got decent crit damage, so when it hits with a slash proc from hunter munitions, it hits hard. I don't see another way of building an AoE weapon like this unless you have a niche build, but this is the budget version that I would suggest. And of course, here is the steel path version for the later game players. For the elements, I would suggest running Toxin for viral. And like I said, low status chance, slow fire rate, big booms. Can't really build around any other elements. Honestly though, for an AoE weapon, A tier. Its damage is really good. Moving on to the Tenet Flux Rifle. Yeah, I know many people like this weapon, but I don't. I mean, it's cool and it's really satisfying. It's like a Tenet burst on Canon, but the reality is the weapon by itself is not great. Even with Flux Overdrive, its unique mod, it does scale well with aptitude, but you still need priming, and it's just meh, it's not so great. I don't know how else to describe it, but I don't feel its damage is that great unless you are seriously investing into it and you are using a primer. Unless I have built this weapon wrong or went for the wrong element, I went for a heat progenitor. But yeah, it's not bad, it's just not wow. It doesn't have any fancy gimmicks or anything, it literally just has insane base fire rate. I would really recommend running punch through with this weapon in order to make it feel a lot better, and modding this weapon is rather tricky because of Flux Overdrive. It's a really good mod, it allows you to have really good status chance, but modding for a dual element, let's say heat and corrosive, makes it tough because you will miss out on an elementalist or a bane to increase the dot damage. From my testing and experience, going for a full dot damage and boosting those procs is a lot better. This does mean dropping Flux Overdrive and modding for, let's say, viral, so if you have heat progenitor, you can get 10 viral procs and a bane while boosting your slash and heat procs. It just works a lot better in my honest opinion. But of course, this is up to you and you can just use it as a guideline. This is what the budget build looks like, which doesn't make use of aptitude, and this is the steel path version, which does make use of aptitude. For the elements, I would suggest running heat or toxin. The Flux Rifle has good slash already, so going for viral isn't bad. The Flux Rifle by itself is a C tier. If you include other factors to boost the weapon, then maybe B tier for me. Before we go further, a word from our sponsor. This video is sponsored by War Thunder, the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made, and is available now for free on PC, console, and mobile. Do you like roly-polies that go boom? Well then War Thunder is for you. It doesn't stop there. Take command of over 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships of 10 big nations, ranging from the 1920s all the way to modern day vehicles of war. War Thunder has a game mode for every type of player, ranging from an arcade game mode that is suitable for fast-paced gameplay, simulator mode for the ultimate challenge, and lastly, realistic mode, which is the perfect middle ground, striking the balance between intensity and authenticity. So it's all up to you. You will find anything you want in War Thunder. War Thunder offers insane immersive graphics with an in-depth customization system, allowing you to make your tank or plane look pretty. It also has a cool X-ray feature showing you exactly how you damage the target and what havoc you wreaked. Join a massive community worldwide of over 70 million players in epic PvP battles today. Dive straight into the breathtaking experience that is War Thunder. Unmatched high-quality gameplay and content. Click the link in the description and claim a huge free bonus pack available for new and returning players that haven't played in the last 6 months. This applies to only PC and consoles. Claim an exclusive free vehicle decoration Eagle of Valor, free 100,000 Silver Lions, and a 7-day premium account. This bonus is only available for a limited time. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description and download War Thunder on PC, console, and iOS or Android for free. I will see you all on the battlefield. Up next, we have the Tenet Arca Plasmor. Yes, we all know the Tenet Arca Plasmor, don't we? The shotgun that hits like a truck. Honestly, one of the most satisfying weapons to use from time to time, but it does come with some drawbacks. The Tenet Arca Plasmor shoots out a blast that ricochets off of objects. It does have punch through, so shooting through a bunch of enemies and hitting a wall behind them will allow the projectile to just bounce back through them or wherever it ricochets to. Now, while the shotgun hits like a truck, it comes with two major drawbacks. Its terrible fire rate and horrid reload speed. So my basis for this rating is simple. The weapon is so bad unless it is modded for reload speed and fire rate. Personally, the primed version of the reload speed mod is a must-have, but the base will do. You can also make use of chilling reload, which paired with tactical pump will give you about 100% reload speed, and you also have primary merciless, which also gives you that extra reload speed as well. This makes the Arca Plasmor feel so much better. Without this, it is just insufferable. I don't like running this weapon without those two stats. Now, when it comes to building the Arca Plasmor, you can go for a hunting munitions, which is not usually ideal because it's a slow fire rate and single shot weapon, but when it lands a slash proc, it hits hard, especially when building for that damage over time. This is the hunting munitions setup, or you can go a pure damage setup. This would work better in steel parts making use of galvanized savvy. Galvanized savvy does work since the projectile isn't really an AoE, it's like a pseudo AoE projectile, but it is still affected by galvanized savvy. This does mean you will need priming, and this is what the setup looks like. The Bane is a flexible slot. For Star Chart players, honestly, this one right here works really well and will carry you straight through Star Chart. For the elements, I would suggest running magnetic or toxin to go viral or corrosive. The Arca Plasmor does have innate radiation, so keep this in mind too. For the rating, honestly, A tier, but S tier with certain external buffing like priming and other unique synergies, not to mention the fact that Arca Plasmor with Mag's bubble is S+++ tier, there's just no debate. One of my favorite Tenet weapons. Before we go further, if I could ask that you hit that like button as it really helps me out and goes a long way, thank you so much, my kind tenor. Alright, moving on to the Tenet Ferrox. I'm gonna be honest here, I don't have much to say about this weapon, other than the fact that it's just a utility weapon in my eyes. It's a spear gun that shoots out projectiles, and I don't think this weapon is that great for damage unless there is a niche setup that I have missed, and that maybe I do not know of. But for a weapon and build that you can kind of just slap on any loadout, it's really bad. For utility though, I think it's pretty cool. It has a unique trait that allows you to yoink your stick and slowly, pull enemies in, dealing electricity damage. But yeah, even the pull is slow and you may as well just use the Nautilus. It's just not for me. However, I will say when testing, I did find this weapon's ult fire to be somewhat decent against corpus enemies. This is the build that I used for the damage setup, and this is a utility build that I used. For the elements, honestly, whatever your heart desires for this one, I would guess the usual elements would work, but it is more difficult because you can only buy it through the trader, so you don't have a choice what element comes up. For the rating, D tier for me, C tier with utility in mind. I will say though, I may not know of a unique synergy for this weapon, so take this with a pinch of salt for those of you who like this weapon or maybe know more than me. For the last primary on this list, the Tenet Glaxion. It's a newer Tenet weapon, which is honestly an absolute beast. It's like the Torrid Incarnate in a sense, and it's a beam weapon that chains to nearby enemies. And well, any high status chance beam weapon that chains and allows you to have a progenitor on it, making it easier to mod for a weapon, immediately makes it very, very strong. You literally cannot go wrong with this weapon. The Tenet Glaxion will have innate cold and will chain to 3 nearby enemies. When it comes to modding the Tenet Glaxion, it is a loaded weapon and it's very tough to choose, so remember it does depend on the element you have chosen. Bear in mind you also have the Photon Overcharge mod if you'd like. I personally don't use it, but that's up to you. Not only that, this weapon has very high status chance, which makes it modding for damage over time of status effects really, really strong to pair with this weapon. Whenever I see a beam weapon with high status chance, it's blasting time, baby. Yes, you knew it was going to be here, so blast. I love blast. It's amazing. I did opt for a corrosive blast setup though to build for those stacks easier, or you can drop corrosive and go for something else. It's up to you, but for just general gameplay and like low level steel path or base steel path, corrosive blast is fine. Don't worry. It does big booms, so it's good. Now this will be affected by the element you have chosen. I think I've said that like 3 times already, but anyway, you get the point. You can also go for a corrosive heat or a viral heat setup, which I personally use, which works extremely well for pretty much every faction, and it's a really nice slap and go build. If you go for a magnetic progenitor or a toxin progenitor, you can run a magnetic toxin build, which will actually shred through corpus enemies like butter. There are so many options with this weapon. Here is the star chart setup that I would suggest, and this thing even kills steel path enemies as a star chart build. For the elements, I would suggest heat, toxin, or magnetic 100%. It all depends on how you want to build it. It's up to you, just use my build as guidelines. Cool. For the rating, S tier, no brainer, S tier all the way. It's nothing less than that. Alright, next on the list is the Tenet Cycron. I mean, come on. Do I even need to talk about this weapon? It's S tier right off the bat. It's a beam weapon, much like the Kuva, and they're pretty much the exact same with some minor differences, but the damage from this pistol and the battery recharge mechanic, as well as chaining to nearby enemies, you just can't go wrong with it. It's also got ridiculous status chance as well, making it an absolute demon when pairing this with secondary encumber. It's pretty much the secondary version of the Tenet Glaxion, essentially, but better, I would like to argue. I personally say heat is the way with this weapon through and through, and making use of secondary encumber or Cascadia flare. It also can be used as a primer since it has really good status chance and has infinite ammo that recharges really quickly. It doesn't have any fancy gimmicks other than the beam chaining, and here is the endgame secondary encumber build, and just switch out the arcane to Cascadia flare if you want that instead. Here is the budget version for Star Chart players, and here is the primer build too if you want to use that, of course. For the progenitors, I'd say heat is the way with the Cycron, or maybe magnetic. And for the rating, S+++ tier. It's a godly pistol. Up next, we have the Tenet Spirex. Spirex? I don't know, one of the two. But anyway, it is an underrated demon of a pistol. Often overlooked, and honestly I discovered this pistol's potential by fluke when I was randomly testing one day, and it really surprised me, to be fair. It's a single fire pistol that has the unique trait that increases your reload speed by 25% for 4 seconds and stacks up 2 times when you land a headshot on enemies. It's just a solid flat damage pistol. However, its big downside is you cannot mod for punch through, which is kind of weird, but it's an explosive projectile after all. When modded correctly and primed and armor stripped, this weapon can do millions of damage against tougher targets. Another downside is the fact that it only has 8 bullets and it can only technically kill 1 target at a time since you don't have punch through. The explosive projectile does have a radius that can be extended with fulmination, but that's up to you if you really want to do that. In my personal opinion, this weapon shines with single target, very tanky targets. And that's where you should use it since that's where it shines. It also scales really well with galvanized shot, but this is only if you're priming. For a slap on any loadout, it's not that bad, to be honest. Here is the main steel pass setup, and here is a budget version. When it comes to its elements, I would say heat. Heat is a go-to, and we do make use of hemorrhage because of the innate impact, so there's no need to get an impact progenitor. For my rating, I'd say B tier. If you are using it for what it's good for, like priming, single target, armor stripping against high level targets or high health targets, then A tier for me. But if you pair it with, let's say, Ureli, then yeah, S tier. But she makes most secondaries godly, let's be real here. Moving on to the Tenet Diplos. These are dual pistols, which have a very satisfying gun sound and just overall good damage. They are really good. I personally don't like the unique trait. In hipfire you can autofire, but they have a gimmick that allows you to target up to 8 enemies by aiming and then fire to release 2 shots at each target. It will also reload 10% of your magazine per second when it's holstered. I just don't like how this unique trait works mechanically. It's just weird. I don't know how to describe it, but I don't like it. It just ruins the flow of the weapon or the gameplay for me. So a workaround, if you agree with me and you don't like it, is shoot while hip firing, then aim while shooting. This will allow you to sustain the autofire the whole time, but if you do stop shooting while in aim mode, it will switch to the targeting mode, which means you'll just have to repeat the previous step. So shoot and hip fire, aim, and then keep shooting the whole time. Or otherwise, you can honestly just fully hip fire. That works too. Overall though, the crit from these pistols and the overall damage is really good. And I went for a viral heat setup since these pistols also have innate slash, and if you are in the steel part, you can opt for a Bane or Elementidist, or you can go galvanized shot. I prefer galvanized shot as it scales really well, and also punch through makes this weapon so much better. So yeah, depending on how you're building your weapon, I would recommend running punch through if you can spare a mod slot. This is the main steel path build that I use, and here is the budget version as well. The reload speed on these bad boys is really bad, so keep this in mind when you are building them. For the progenitor suggestions, I would say heat or toxin. For the rating, I'd give them an A tier. They are really good as crit hoses, so yeah. Moving on to the Tenet Detron. Now this pistol used to be godly for Profit Taker, which I think is still good, but I haven't done Profit Taker in a long time. But for general gameplay, it's okay. It's not bad, but it's not wow. It has a unique feature that allows you to essentially mag dump in one go. When this is built correctly, it's actually really fun with the alternate fire, but it does need some love in my opinion from external sources like arcanes from your Warframe and such. When this is modded for punch through, it's really good for clearing groups that are lined up. I have seen this weapon do ridiculous damage with certain setups, but we are trying to factor the rating in with no external buffing. Like I said, it's just okay, like somewhat good. This is the main build, and here is the budget version. For the elements, I would suggest either toxin or heat or magnetic, whichever one tickles your fancy. And for my personal rating, I'd give it a B tier. I don't have much more to say about this weapon. Alright, up next we have the Tenet Plinx. The Tenet Plinx is a thick boy. It's a battery mechanic pistol that has 10 magazine capacity, but its unique trait allows you to use an alternate fire that charges a shot that pulls all enemies in within 6 meters before exploding, doing an insane amount of damage. And this thing is a damage powerhouse, alright. Like, it really does ridiculous damage. Even by itself with no external buffing sources, it really is just a crit demon. For this pistol, you want to focus on pure flat damage and even crit, as it scales really well with this weapon. The only thing I don't like about this weapon is when you use the alternate fire, it doesn't kill the enemies, it just yoinks them everywhere, which is slightly annoying, but not the end of the world. This is the main build that I use, and here is the budget version for the star chart players. You can also run Hemorrhage if you want to, but I personally prefer Heat with Cascadia Flare. But for the element suggestions, I would say Heat is the go-to because, well, the status chance is really low on this weapon, and at least the heat procs will scale really well when they do proc. For my personal rating, I'd say A tier, as this thing shreds in the star chart as well. Up next, we are on to melees, which is first on this list, and that will be the Tenet Grigori. This is a scythe, and scythes are godly. Why? Because of melee afflictions and the stance reaping spiral. These two things paired together are simply elite. The Tenet Grigori has a cool unique trait that allows you to release an energy disc when you heavy slide attack. This energy disc ricochets and travels further based on your combo multiplier. Also, your combo duration is paused while holstered. I mean, it's a pretty cool trait, but I find the whole sliding thing to be a bit weird sometimes, and it's just kind of a weird playstyle, but it's really strong when it hits enemies. Looking past the unique trait, the Grigori by itself is more than enough and is a force to be reckoned with. This weapon with melee afflictions is just disgusting. It does so much damage. You can run Electricity Progenitor and then run Melee Influence, that honestly works too. I happen to pick up a Cold Progenitor, which means just viral for me. And this is the main build that I use for Steel Path. And of course, here is the budget version for Star Chart players. For the elements, I would suggest Electricity or Toxin or Cold. Whichever one you manage to pick up, since melees you don't have much of a choice. For my rating, S tier, no debate. This thing does ridiculous amounts of damage. Moving on to the Tenet Agendus. This is essentially Thor's hammer with Captain America's shield. So the Agendus for me was a really nice surprise. The final Harbinger stance is a lot better than I thought when paired with melee afflictions, and it's a really cool kind of movement set, I guess you could call it that. The unique trait sends out a projectile when you heavy attack, so this with Tenet equals really satisfying gameplay, and like I said, it surprised me a lot. Its damage is very, very good, and you can of course make use of melee influence if you either get an Electricity Progenitor or mod for it. I personally prefer melee afflictions because of the stance and how the weapon lifts enemies up really easily, and this unique trait is honestly more satisfying than broken in my opinion. It still does very, very good damage. If you like a shield and hammer playstyle, you will be pleasantly surprised by this weapon. And of course, this is the main Steel Path build that uses afflictions. Here is a melee influence version, and here is the budget version for Star Chart players. But the elements, what you can get your hands on, I guess. And if you can eventually get a specific one, this depends on how you want to build it. Electricity might not be a bad option for influence. And for my rating, solid S tier in my books. Like I said, I was pleasantly surprised. Alright, moving on to the Tenet Exec. This is a heavy blade that I so badly want to love. Now let me explain why I say this. The Tenet Exec has a unique trait similar to the Sampost, where if you slam attack, you release a wave of explosions. And if you heavy slam attack, you release multiple waves in a cone in front of you. I personally love this, and I find it very satisfying. However, the waves don't have any status chance, meaning you can't proc anything on them, meaning it doesn't do much damage at higher levels. However, interestingly enough, if you pair a primer with melee afflictions and use the slam explosions, it'll proc melee afflictions and increase your primer stacks drastically. But still, I do wish you could at least apply slash or whatever you mod for on your slam attacks, making it a lot stronger. Now that I think about it, it also applies to the Sampost as well. But if you do pair Saren with these two weapons, you get a really nice result, to be honest with you. On another note, this weapon's slash procs do be a little gnarly when you proc afflictions with viral procs from your weapons. This is the Steel Path build. It's a bit weird, I know, but we use Buzzkill to lift your slash rating, allowing us to proc it more often. And here is the budget version. For the elements, melees is tough. Honestly, go for magnetic or electricity, whichever one you get. For my personal rating, like I said, I want to love this weapon, but I wish the slams did more. I'd say C tier. But honestly, with Saren, it's broken, it's S tier if you use it with Saren. This finally brings us to the last weapon on this list, the Tenet Livia, the two-handed Nakana. So, yeah, this is the slash damage with Tenet and a triple galvanized setup. You know, that's pretty respectable damage. And with the mod Reach, you can effectively hit multiple enemies in an arc with this heavy attack animation. So yeah, this one surprised me a little as well, I'm not gonna lie. It does have a unique trait. When blocking an enemy attack, it has a 20% chance to increase your block angle by 5 degrees, which stacks up 5 times. Combo duration will also be paused while holstered. Personally, I don't care about this. It's pretty decent for blocking, but yeah, not something super crazy. This weapon is just slash proc central. It's a Nakana after all, and you cannot go wrong with Nakanas. They are all broken. And I opted for boosting the slash procs like crazy, as you can get some crazy damage with Tenet. This is the steel pass build that I opted for, which gives you crazy amounts of slash damage. And here is the budget version. This weapon is a hidden gem. For elements, the usual magnetic, electricity, or toxin, nothing different here. For my rating, like I said, hidden gem, S tier. This is crazy damage for just raw potential with no external buffing. Imagine slapping raw with this weapon and priming. It's broken. And that concludes the list. I know that some of you may not agree, but please, just before you comment and put me on a stake because I didn't put your weapon where you think it should have gone, just stop and think about my rules and guidelines for the ratings to put it into perspective. Otherwise, let me know if you agree or don't agree with this list in the comments below. I'm not going to yap any longer. If you enjoyed this video and have not seen my Kuva tier list version, then go and check that one out. You will be seeing the new infested lich weapons as well when they come out soon. Once again, a huge thank you to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to click the link below and play it on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and mobile for free. New and returning players that haven't played in 6 months can claim a massive bonus pack across all platforms, excluding mobile, which will include multiple premium vehicles and other free goodies. Available only for a limited time, so don't miss out on this amazing opportunity. A huge thank you to all of our amazing channel members, and a special thank you to Darwin, Fish, Joshua, Caden, Shakiro, Edson Yard, and Tythrax. Alright, I'm gonna go now. Bye. Can't wait to piss people off. It's gonna be so much fun.